the Walmart voter scared the crap out of Donald Trump. And that's why he changed his economic policy in midstream within the first 100 days, slamming the brakes on his tariff war while keeping many aspects of it in place, destroying trillions of dollars of wealth, making the polling voters of America hate the Trump administration. And we would be a lot worse off if Donald Trump didn't take a visit from the ghosts of Christmas future in the form of the CEOs of Walmart, Target, and Home Depot, who literally went to the Oval Office and said, "You like empty shelves in stores? Is that a good look for the Trump administration and the Trump economy? Stop your tariff war, especially with China." Now, it's already having an effect. Container ships that are now arriving at U.S. ports based on that policy are light by about 20 to 25%. Less goods are coming in, which meaning there's a scramble on supply chain and logistics. I thought the reason we voted for Trump, I mean, I really don't know the reason people voted for Trump, but I thought one of the compelling narratives was that he was a business person that knew how to run a business. Although that business it has a $500 million persistent fraud charge against it. And about every other business Donald Trump has ever had has gone bankrupt, where he's had to disclose it in his own securities filings. But I thought the reason was, we want a businessman to run America like a business. How's that going so far? Maybe the fundamental reason it's not going well is because this is not a business. This is a government that has national security concerns, that has domestic policy concerns, that has social safety net concerns, right? How about that? It's an employer of millions of people, at least the last time I looked. We're going to pull it all together. But Donald Trump was so scared of the Walmart voter. That is what controls and consumes him, right? He eats polls and public adulation like they're McDonald's French fries. But that's no way to run an economy or no way to run a presidency. And the polls show it. We're watching the worst 100 days, first 100 days in the history of polling. I'm Michael Popok. You're here on Legal AF. Look, take a minute. We're trying to get to 600,000 subscribers in this week. And we will do it with your help. And it's important because not only will you get the reminders about the content here at the intersection of law and politics, but it allows me to bring on some amazing new contributors, new points of view, new podcasts, all here. And it's all coming together on Legal AF because of you. We're building this fellowship together. Hit the subscribe button. All right, now look. The reason I thought, the compelling narrative I thought for Donald Trump was, I am a business person who knows how to run a business. Set aside for a minute that every other of his businesses went bankrupt, that he went personally bankrupt, that he's got a $500 million personal judgment against him for persistent fraud in New York. Let's just lay that aside for a minute, shall we? You would have thought there's a reason we call it the Trump administration or an administration, because there's more levers of power than Donald Trump himself, sleepy, lethargic, turtle-like Donald Trump can pull himself. So he's got to have people with him. But he's brought with him a bunch of people that are just bootlickers and sycophants, and they won't tell him the truth. And they are all crazed about, they were anyway, tariffs. Peter Navarro, his trade representative, fresh off a stint in prison for lying to Congress and other things. Howard Lutnick, who's never been in government before, barely ran his own family office business in New York. Those guys are pushing. Stephen Miller, why does he have so much power? He's really the co-president. It's not. Well, one thing we learned from the Signal chat gate about what happened with the Defense Department and them talking on an unsecure line about bombing Yemen and the Houthis. One thing we learned there is that Stephen Miller's calling the shots. So, but he's not an economist. So all of these non-economists get together in a room and convince Donald Trump to lay out tariffs on 200 countries at 23% on average, including 145% on China. All right, that's where Walmart comes in. Because, as I said, the ghost of Christmas future, Walmart, Target, and Home Depot, with chains rattling, came knocking on Donald Trump's door literally in the Oval Office. And they painted a vision of what the Trump economy would look like in the next month or two as container ships show up at ports half empty. I mean, they're already down 25%. The new container ships showing up now which are based on the tariffs, are light by between 20 and 25%. And that's the first set of ships in. They're telling, we raised, $300 billion in tariffs. Oh, it pales in comparison by the amount of trade that you killed. And everyone, we stopped them. We did a 90-day, pause. Yeah, that's not how worldwide supply and logistics work. They didn't hear pause. They heard erratic president of the United States. We've got to work around him because we got ships and supply and logistics that we have to manage. I mean, I've been lucky enough in my life to represent some of the largest ship container companies in the world and logistics supply companies in the world. It is a supremely complex business. But at the end of the day, it's balancing supply and demand. It is a purely market-driven process. It is capitalism in its purest form. Now, Donald Trump doesn't know anything about logistics and supply chain. People thought he did. Well, he does know, right? No, because he doesn't build anything. Donald Trump slaps his name on buildings under licensing agreements. When you see a building with Trump's name on it, he hasn't built a building from a hole in the ground up in like 30 or 40 years. He signs licensing agreements that put his brand on a building. He's so sullied his brand in America, he can't do that anymore. So he's got to run to Dubai and India and Croatia and Slovenia and places that put Trump buildings up. But he's not putting up these buildings. So he only hears incidentally about, the steel is late and this subcontractor is late. And he doesn't manage a supply chain. He didn't run a Fortune 500 manufacturing company. And if he understands supply chain economics the way he does the separation of powers in the American government, you can see what our problem is. He's a C student at best running our government. And so would you imagine if Biden rolled out in the first 50 days a failed tariff plan and then hit the brakes because the leaders of some of the top retailers came knocking on his door and told him that he was wrong, and the bond market told him he was wrong, and the polls told him he was wrong, and he said, I'm wrong, I'm going to reverse it. Can you imagine what would be said about sleepy Joe Biden and wrecking the economy? Say what you want about Joe Biden, but we had a roaring economy that was handed, on a velvet pillow to Donald Trump, who then within 50 days turned it into a bear market heading in the wrong direction and got rid of $1 trillion worth of value from our markets and our bank accounts and our investment accounts. And it's not coming back anytime soon. Where's the recovery? I saw him lie in a Time magazine article about his first 100 days. First of all, my takeaway from that, I'll do a separate hot take on it. My takeaway from that is he was gassed during most of that interview. He was confused. He was befuddled. My favorite was when they asked him, during our last interview, Mr. President, you said you would abide by all rulings of the United States Supreme Court. I said, what? I said, what? That summed it up for me. You can't follow the continuity of this thought train, Trump? You got to abide by your oath of office? Try that. So what is the takeaway? The takeaway is that the whole narrative that got Donald Trump elected, that it'll be great for the economy, was a lie. We knew it. We said it here on Midas Touch and on Legal AF. How many different ways could we say it? Our audience heard it. We were preaching to the choir. We were trying to get our voices out beyond the choir, right? And see if we could convert some people, but they were scared. They were scared, they didn't love the Democratic policy or the Democratic standard bearer. And everybody thought, well, at least we may not like Trump. We'll hold our nose about his morals, his values, what he does, what he says, his misogyny, and all the rest of that. But however, he knows how to run a company. He knows how to run a business. We'll do fine with the economy. And now the vast majority, I'm talking 65% of America, based on 3 sets of polls in the last week, all say the same thing. Donald Trump is terrible for the economy. The Republicans are terrible for the economy. Everybody's worse off than they were before Donald Trump. that the country is heading in the wrong direction. That arrow alone, which controls really outcomes for elections, wrong direction, right direction, wrong direction by 21 points. That is unheard of in a first 100 days of an administration. Now, Donald Trump's telling everybody, yeah, my flood the zone policy, my flood the zone plan, I was going to do all these big things all at the same time and overwhelm my opposition, go after law firms and go after media organizations and go after prosecutors and federal judges and go after federal workers. I'm getting exhausted just going over the list. Who does that all at once? And let me F with the economy. Let me cut America out of the American economy. Let me cut the umbilical cord of the social safety net. Let me cut the funding that goes to not-for-profits that help the American people. Let me change the relationship, and not for the better, between the American people and their government. Let me cut humanitarian aid. Let me cut the Secretary of State and the State Department. Let me cut diplomacy. Let me mismanage the war. Let me get trolled and taken advantage of and snookered by Putin. And he thought nobody would notice in his first 100 days. So we noticed. Call me crazy, but I'd like a president that doesn't run his economic policy based on who knocks on the door and who's on line one. I'm going to continue to follow it all right here very closely. Only on Legal AF. As I said before, help us get to 600,000 subscribers this week by hitting the subscribe button. It is free. It signals to me, keeps the lights on, keeps the contributors coming, and it helps me bring in some new amazing talent right here to join the 12 or so other contributors we have on Legal AF. So until my next reporting, I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.